Thank you so much, sir. We'll move on to our next session. This is the icon oration. The Mrs. Geeta Rameshchandra Gandhi oration. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our three chairpersons. Dr. Nikhil Gadial Patil, medical oncologist from Hyderabad. Dr. Purish Parikh, medical oncologist and hematologist from Mumbai. And Dr. Hemant Malhotra, medical oncologist from Jaipur. I now request the chairpersons to please come on stage and also to introduce our esteemed orator.
Thank you very much. It's a pride and privilege to chair with Dr. Hemant Malhotra and Dr. Nikhil Gadial Patil this prestigious Geeta Rameshchandra Gandhi Oration. This oration is named after a very soft-spoken teacher, and obviously we are all, honoring teachers. For this Golden Jubilee icon, the teacher is none other than Dr. Ravi Kannan, and we all know him because he is also soft-spoken and has received innumerable awards for all the hard work that he has done. The slide represents his current stature and on the work that he has done, and I don't want to take much time from his oration. We are all waiting to hear him with bated breath. So, Ravi, pleasure and honor to have you with us. Give this oration.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate today. I have been hearing some of the previous talks, and I don't have anything as exciting as VEGF inhibitors and immunotherapy and CTL4, and I want to talk of cancer care at both ends of the cancer care spectrum, from prevention and early detection to the other end to palliative care. So I work in a town called Silchar. Dr. Purish Parikh was one of our earliest visitors. And Silchar is on the eastern side of Bangladesh. And if Bangladesh were not there, it would be far more easier to get to that part of the country. As it is a challenge. And paradox, and like many other parts of the country, we have our own problems. There's problems of travel, of access, of geography, of weather. It rains so much of the time. And it is a challenge for patients to reach suitable health care in many parts of the region. And but then, just as a curiosity, because we are on the eastern side, the sun rises earlier in Silchar and then it rises in Dhaka. But the clock strikes six first in Dhaka, and then it strikes 6 just because we follow a different time zone. And also, what is remarkable is, today it is a challenge to reach many parts of the region. 120, 130 years ago, it must have been a jungle, and with malaria and whatnot. And Ronald Ross was awarded the Nobel Prize for Physiology and Medicine in 1902. And he started his malaria work in the tea gardens of the Northeast. And he's actually spent several months in a tea garden hospital in Labok, about 30 kilometers from where we are. And his hand drawings, which are, a lot of it is moth-eaten, and his microscope, the microscope that he used, are still kept there. But unfortunately, we have not learned to create a museum of it. It is there for anybody to go and see. And in 2007, when we joined, it was a small hospital, and we had 20 beds. Total staff strength was 23. We were seeing about less than 2,000 new patients, out of which 800 were cancers, and most patients earned very small amounts. And so over a period of time, we put in place several measures to improve cancer care. And then, so at one point of time, we were providing low cost or no cost treatment, we were providing boarding, we were providing lodging, the routine spiel that all of us are familiar with. And we realized in 2011, when we had to do an audit for the Indo-American Cancer Association, because they were supporting us for palliative care, we found that only 30% of our patients came back for oral morphine. And nearly 60% of patients did not come back for a second visit to the hospital. They came one visit and they left. They never came back. And not even 30% were completing treatment. And so that was an eye-opener for us. And so we, over a period of time, we put in place several measures in order to help patients access, accept, and complete treatment. And, several knee-jerk reactions. Initially we said, oh, why are they not completing treatment? Because they're all daily wage earners. So we said, okay, let's provide ad hoc employment on campus. We said they were going and not coming back. So my colleague Abhijit created a software. Today's date is open. All the patients who are scheduled to come today appear. As we see them, their names disappear, and what is left behind are people who have not come. Then we get on the phone, we call them, we make home visits, we started satellite clinics, we eliminated hidden costs. And then we started using technology extensively. We have an 15-bed intensive care unit. We don't have a pulmonologist. We don't have a critical care specialist. And so we put these high-definition cameras in the ICU. And we have a group of physicians sitting in Bangalore on the cloud. And the whole ICU is a cloud ICU. In the beginning, we were all very skeptical. How can somebody take care of sick people when they are not on the floor with the patient? But believe me, it makes a humongous difference. We had a patient with, we did some abdominal surgery, hemicolectomy, I think. And 2 days later, some problem, patient was going to arrest. Before the cloud physician could warn the nurse on the floor, patient arrested. Revived, a few minutes later, arrested a second time, revived, put on a ventilator, 5 days later, arrested a third time, revived a third time. Patient now several months, more than a year gone, is on follow-up. And so there are several such stories where it actually saves lives. And then, of course, we have the virtual tumor boards, and we have several things. Our target is patient comes today because they're all daily wage earners. Every day lost is wages lost. And so if we say, you come in today, come back tomorrow for investigations, come back a third time for biopsies, come back another time they will all fall through the cracks. So our target is patient comes in today, same day the blood biochemistry workup is done. The next day morning they will have their endoscopies, biopsies. In the afternoon they'll have their imaging. And all our biopsies, all our pathology works on frozen sections. So patient's biopsy is done in the morning. When they come in the afternoon, the pathology report is ready. And so within 24 hours, for most patients, we are able to have a diagnosis, staging, and treatment plan ready. And over a period of time, almost 70% of patients complete treatment. For us, 70% is a very poor figure, because in Hyderabad or Mumbai, in TMH, for example, if 60% of patients complete treatment, it is very good, because most patients come to TMH for a diagnosis and an opinion on treatment, and then they will take the advice back to their hometowns to complete treatment there. For me, I am the bottom line. Nobody is going to take my advice and go somewhere else. And so for us, we have to be able to treat at least about 90% of patients. If we say we are treating 50, 60, 70%, the balance patients are probably going back home to die. In the initial years, we also realized that in order to build trust, poor people are extremely wary of hospitals. They are afraid of hospitals because they think if they go there, all their money will be lost and they will be on the streets. And so we need to put in a lot of effort in the community to build that trust. And in the initial years, we were out every weekend, we would be out in the community conducting what we thought were screening camps, only to realize quickly that kids as small as 6 months to people as old as 85 years come in, and these camps were not really serving any purpose in anybody's lives. And so by about 2014, we stopped all these camps together. What has happened is, if you look at this is data from breast cancer patients that we are seeing. In the initial years, most patients would not complete treatment. And as we put in effort, as time elapsed, more and now almost 70-80% of patients complete prescribed treatment. But what has not changed is the stage at presentation. Even now, a very large number of patients continue to present with very advanced disease. And so, while we stop the screening camps, we still continue to work in the community for tobacco control, for schools, colleges. And then also important for us was to keep the hospital functioning no matter what happened. COVID came, we did not have to shut down the hospital for even, we had horrendous floods, and for even a day we did not shut, there was water almost 6 feet inside the hospital. My colleagues rigged up a OPD outside in a mound outside the hospital. We started delivering palliative care, simple chemotherapy outside, and we were ferrying patients who needed more complicated treatment into the hospital into home-fashioned rafts. And so we were able to keep, it is very important to engage with the community no matter what. We are now in the process of, our current thing is 30% of patients are not completing treatment because of distance. And so if they have to travel, there are areas where even if you have to travel 10 kilometers, it takes over 6 hours to traverse those 10 kilometers. And so we are now looking at creating a network of hospitals and daycare clinics and what we call our PEP centers, so that we are taking, see, obviously we cannot take radiation therapy to people's homes, we cannot take imaging to, but we can take the hospital as close to their homes as possible, and that is what we are trying to do. In between, what happened was in 2016, the government of India came out with its guidelines for cancer screening, cancer and some NCDs, and what they envisage is that the ASHA in the community will mobilize the community to come to a sub-center where the A&M is supposed to be screening these people for breast, cervical, oral cancer and diabetes and hypertension. Now what we thought was the math is not in favor of the A&M. A&M typically has a population of about 5,000 people to take care of. She has deliveries to conduct, immunization to do, registers to maintain, and if she has to also screen the population, this is not going to happen. The other thing is, most of our population works for daily wages, and so a person who feels is seemingly healthy will not want to lose a day's wages to go to a hospital and get himself or herself screened. And so we said we will train the ASHA to triage examine the population in her area. The ASHA hails from that community. Typically an ASHA has about 1,000 people under her, out of whom about 300, a third of them will be screen eligible. And so we said if the ASHA were to examine even one person a day, in a year she would have completed her whole target. And so we taught the ASHA to examine the oral cavity, examine the breast and examine the cervix. She actually was taught to do a VIA and just say normal or abnormal. She was not taught to diagnose cancer from erosion and ectropion and all that. Just say looking normal, looking abnormal. When we started this story, a lot of objections were there. Asha will not be able to do it, she'll be incompetent, she'll tear the vagina, hordes of objections were there. Fortunately, our ethics committee supported us and ICMR supported us with a grant for this. So we had to answer 4 questions. Will the Asha be willing to do this? Will the Asha be able to do this? Would the community accept the Asha in this role? And would screening at home, we actually said the ASHA will do this examination in the homes of the population. So the population does not have to lose wages in order to go to a hospital. So we designed a reporting format on tablet computers, and Tata Trust gave us money to purchase tablet computers for about 200 odd ASHA. And then the ASHA were actually trained, they were taught theory, they were taught practicals, and then they were taught communication skills. And this took about 2 weeks for each sub-center. And at the end of it, there was an evaluation process that examined all these things, and the ASHA actually did very well. And after that, we went out with the ASHA into the community, in the beginning going door to door to door, triage examining the population and hand-holding the ASHA through this process. And we said in the beginning, we said we would re-examine about 10% of the people the ASHA says is normal. All abnormals were seen by one of us, but we said 10%, but we didn't do 10%, we could only do about 5% of them. But we found that whenever the ASHA said that it looks normal, it was actually normal. We did not find any discrepancy. We re-examined about 2,000 people. But when the ASHA said is abnormal, in those cases we found some of them were actually not really abnormal. And so what happened was, this is not a screening project. There is no overdiagnosis. They are only talking of normal and abnormal. And so at the end of the project, we were actually able to show that the ASHA were willing to do it. They had time. They were able to do it. They proved to be competent. The community accepted them very well in this role, and home screening is actually possible. But then when we examined nearly 47,000, out of 60,000 odd people, we were able to contact 50,000 people. And out of the 50,000 people, nearly 47,000, the compliance was more than 95%. Now, 47,000 people were examined, but we only found about 50 cancers and about 150 pre-cancers. This was a very labor-intensive process. And as opposed to the cancers, we found nearly 4,000 people with diabetes and or hypertension. In between, we also introduced a small cohort where we wanted to look for HPV and instead of VIA. And so we thought we would do half of them. The ASHA will take a sample and then we will ask the woman to provide a self-sample. And so we were able to do this for about 200 women when COVID came. And so we distributed all the kits to the women without the health worker taking a sample. But then what we found at the end is the concordance between the self-sampling and what the health worker drew was very good. And so we thought that self-sampling may not be a bad way to do it because it reduces the effort of screening for cervical cancer. But then all said and done, July was a very labor. Imagine women going home to home to home, talking to people, administering a questionnaire, looking for evidence for abnormalities in the population. It's a labor-consuming affair. So we said, what happens if we create intense awareness, create a blitzkrieg of information, and see if it will motivate the population to self-refer themselves for examination. So we did the same thing, similar population in Hailakandi district. We chose one health blog, about 60,000 population. The ASHA reached out to about 60,000 people, and she was trained with flip chart. They were given pamphlets on their tablets. We loaded presentations, and at the end, this is the subsequent 3 years. At the end of 3 years, we had about 4,000 odd people who self-referred themselves for evaluation. They thought they had a problem, or on the CBAC form there was a problem, and they self-referred themselves for evaluation. And we found about 90 people with cancers and almost 800 people with pre-cancers. And we realized that in some areas at least, creating awareness may be a great way to do the same story. Again, we looked at HPV and we distributed about 800 samples to people who were symptomatic. And as in the other story, about 6-7% of them were HPV positive. But then the compliance to HPV testing, providing self-sampling was very, very good. And probably for the bulk of the country, if we can find a way to reduce the cost of HPV testing may be a great way to do cervical cancer screening in the country. Now, when COVID came, we were asked to be the COVID hospital for all cancer patients in the region. And we had to do a whole lot of COVID testing. And those numbers were phenomenal. So what we were doing is we were pooling samples and we were testing the pooled samples for COVID. And only batches that showed COVID positivity, we were testing the individual specimens. So, and that worked very well for us. So now we are thinking, what will happen if we do the same for HPV? So we're now trying to pool HPV samples for HPV testing. We are pooling 2 samples, 3 samples, 5 samples, 10 samples, and we're trying to see what would be an optimum way that will pick up people who are HPV positive, not miss out people who have low titers. Meanwhile, when we were doing this awareness story, one of the ASHA told us, see, we are going and doing this awareness in the homes. But why don't you get the fair price shops? Everybody goes to a ration shop. So why don't you get the ration shop fellows to start awareness? So that was something that stuck in our mind. And then the block program officer said, why don't you involve the Panchayat Raj people? Because they have they're all elected people. And so we said this awareness program worked well, or at least we thought it worked well, when we worked only with the health department. What will happen if we work with the health, the police, the teachers, the Anganwadi, several departments of the government to have a convergent messaging? Ultimately, we got population control because of Hum Do Hamare Do. Everywhere it was Hum Do Hamare Do, and today we have reached a plateau. We are now going to show a decline in our population. So what will happen if we all talk of the same thing about cancer, about health promotion and cancer prevention, early detection, And so that is a program that we have just started. I don't have data to share, but next time maybe I will be able to give you data. Meanwhile, the other thing that we are doing is we have a very active, aggressive palliative care program that has inpatient, outpatient, and we have a very robust home care program. So what happens in villages, I'm sure it happens here also, when you go to villages for home care, the whole village will gather to see what is happening. Why a person being visited by somebody from the hospital? So what we do, once the home care program with an ascites is tapped or whatever is done, we gather all the onlookers and we start this awareness story with them. And through this program, we pick up people self-refer themselves, just like what happened in Katlichera, they self-refer themselves. And through this program, we pick up people with cancers. Now, when all this was happening, one of my nurses came and asked me, she's actually a health worker. She came and asked me, sir, we are doing so much in the community, but we are doing all of this in project mode. Once the project is over, we say we have our data, we clap our hands and come away. But we've set in place in the community a process where people are looking forward for diagnosis and support and treatment, and suddenly you leave them high and dry. Is this ethical? And that stumped me. That is the truth. We went to the ethics committee and we had the grant and we had that approval. We did the study and then we walk off. That is not fair. So then we started asking questions, what happens after the grant ends? Who is going to be responsible for the activity? We cannot remain in the district forever. We don't have the resources. And so how can we scale it up? How can we replicate it? And more importantly, how do we continue this? And so we did a quick scoping review in literature, and we found that there are so many community programs happening in the country, but not even one has talked of follow-up post program in the community. And that seems to be a very big ethical issue for us. See, ultimately, any program is bound to end. But sustenance, if we don't talk of sustenance before we initiate the program, it is an ethical issue. And so now we started looking at how do we sustain all these activities in the community once the project suppose dries up. And so we, on one hand, it is good to have a proposal that we think is effective, integrated into the government program. That is something that we are trying right now. The other is to get the community to take ownership of the program and continue the project on its own. Ideal would be a combination of the two. The community keeps the demand alive and the government delivers on the project. And so we looked at several projects across the world, and there are some 2 or 3 of them which stand out for remarkable. There's something called a community-driven development in Africa that looked at child care, agriculture, sanitation, and this worked because water is such a niche need in the community and several areas don't have water. And so once the project was done, the community took on the responsibility for providing water. They gathered the resources, and so this program is running very successfully. Same way, there was a food security program that was run by some mission hospitals and some NGOs in Africa. Again, food being such a vital need, that program is being sustained by the community in itself. In India, we looked at the palliative care model in Kerala. They have what is called the Neighborhood Network for Palliative Care. And that is a community-driven, sustaining thing. From 1990, this program has been running. Now the entire state of Kerala has neighborhood networks for palliative care. They function 6 days a week. And at any given point of time, they have about 300 patients actively under palliative care. And patients are provided with drugs, with nursing, with support, with a whole lot of support, all by the community. The assets are owned by the community. The community actually generates employment for this, and they have a driver, they pay for the driver, they link with the hospital. The hospital provides them the required palliative care services. And at any given point of time, they have more than 100 volunteers. The volunteers keep rotating, and they have 100 volunteers. And what we realized is, in the community, palliative care, like water and food, is a very niche need in the community. There are not only about cancer. There are people with cardiac failure, people with stroke, people with renal failure, several other diseases for which they need palliative care. And if we could create a model where the community takes responsibility for the palliative care, we could piggyback ride our problem of early detection and cancer prevention onto the palliative, just like what we are doing in the PEP program. And so now we are choosing 3 health blocks, and in these health blocks we are recruiting volunteers The ASHA also could serve as a volunteer, but there is no monetary. In all the other programs, the ASHA were incentivized. They were actually paid a incentive. Here we are saying because we want the community to take it up, there are no monetary incentives in the whole story. And we want to do the second P, the palliative care component first, and then write the first P, prevention and early detection, onto the palliative care story. So we're planning to train the volunteers and then get them to do palliative care activities. And so we've written out a whole proposal, and so we are going to try this in 3 days. Meanwhile, in Dima Hasao, which is one of the districts where we are trying this, it's a difficult district to travel. So what we are saying is, we will work with the volunteers in the community, but they cannot come to a sub-center because access is sometimes very difficult. And so GE gave us a vehicle, and now we are saying we will, in Assam, there is what is called the boat clinic in the Brahmaputra. There are several river islands, and people cannot travel from the island to the main sub-center in the mainland. And so the government has devised boat clinics that go from island to island to island, delivering health care. So we just stole that idea here, and we said we will have a traveling cancer clinic. The vehicle will go from sub-center to sub-center. There are about 65 sub-centers. And even if we were to do 3 sub-centers in a week, in a year we would have done all the sub-centers at least twice. And for NCDs, I think 2 visits in a year is not a bad deal. And so that is something we are trying in. So in order to do all of this, we are creating what we call communities for health in the region. We are getting hold of volunteers, we are getting hold of clubs, sports clubs, a whole lot of anybody who is interested in participating. We are trying to create these clubs, and we are trying to get them to take ownership for prevention, creating awareness, early detection, promoting examination, and for palliative care. Now all of this requires help. And I heard Vikas speak about collaboration. Collaboration is very, very important. Without holding hands, none of us individually can achieve much. And so we've had a whole lot of visitors over the years, and every visitor has added value to what we are doing. Somebody has got, Dr. Purvesh Parekh was the first person to visit us, and we got support from the Indian Cancer Society, the first NGO to support our work in the region in order to help treat patients. There are many, many people have come over the years, and each of them has added values, and I think it is very important to raise friends, more important to raise friends than funds. And so if we want to care for patients, we have to really care about them, and we need a group of people who will actually help us do this. National Cancer Grid has been another invaluable source of support for us, and all of us know about the national. And then we work with several organizations in the country for patient support, for patient care, for supporting patients, for research, for many, many activities. Now, all of this is possible because I have a very strong team of colleagues in the organization, be it in medicine, be it in the pharmacy, be it in administration, be it in, so, and all of us together, that is Ritesh, many of you know Ritesh, that is Rajiv, our CFO, that is Rajiv, our chief scientist, Babu, who is he's an untrained OT technician. He learnt on the job, but you won't believe me, he will set fractures, he will take split skin grafts, he will connect patients to a ventilator, he will intubate, he will do a whole lot of things and do them very well. All of us sat down, if we have to, so our now current thought is, see, we are all doing this because we are driven by enthusiasm. But this enthusiasm has to be sustained over different generations and different people. We've gone through what we are going through and we are passionate about it. The next generation of people who join us may not have the same passion. So all of us sat down in a room and wrote down what our core values are. We are saying that problems will change with years and the solutions for these problems also will change. But certain core values like honesty, integrity, faith cannot be changed. And so we said we will be evidence-based, we will be innovative, we will have an attitude of gratitude. We very strongly believe in teamwork. We don't want to change our people-centered, pro-poor approach, and we want to promote an attitude of compassion. All of us sat down and wrote our vision statement. We said we want to be a state-of-the-art cancer center that will ensure that no individual develops a cancer that can be prevented, that no patient is denied appropriate care for want of resources, that no patient dies in agony and indignity, and that no family suffers treatment-induced poverty and grief. A tall order, we may never achieve it, but we can all try to get there, and we will only make things better. So for me, of all these values, I think for us, if we have to really deliver on patient care, compassion is probably the most important value, and I think all of you will agree with me on this. Compassion can have many, many different ways of expression. You may be comforting a small child, you may be keeping the hospital open at the time of a natural calamity. This lady is from Haflong. She has an advanced breast cancer and we don't know what will happen to her. But she and her husband in the evening when they're in the hospital sit down after dinner and like to sing old Hindi love songs. And all the nurses join them in this thing, It's such a nice and romantic vision to see them. When we do home care, this is another story. This is during COVID. Both of them have COVID and they're in the COVID ward. And one patient who is sick is paring the nails for another patient. I think there cannot be a greater expression of compassion. See, for me, as Dr. Purvesh Parikh said, I have been blessed with my mentors, my teachers, and two of the greatest have been Dr. Shanta and Dr. Krishnamurti. For Dr. Shanta, it was always everything for every patient. There was nothing else. And for Dr. Krishnamurti, he would always tell me, I can still imagine, I hear him in my ear ringing, Ravi Kannan, if a patient does not have resources for his or her treatment, it is the job of the treating physician to find them. I think I have been truly blessed in my teachers all along. I think as doctors, all of us are clinicians. We are all into the healing profession. We are also into research. We like to analyze and see what the data shows and try and bring about improvement. We are all teachers. The word doctor means teacher. And we are all teachers. We teach our students, we mentor our scholars, we teach the public about lifestyle, many things. But I think all of us, the most significant role as doctors that we can play is that of a change maker. We all can together, if we join hands, we can actually change the way we treat health and sickness in the communities around us. Thank you very much for this opportunity. That is, thank you in many of the languages spoken at the hospital, in Manipuri, in Khasi, in Punjabi, in Hindi, in Tamil. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kannan. I am almost speechless while I was going through your presentation. The compassion, the courage, and the collaboration, when all come together, that leads to the change what we are all looking at. So once again, heartiest congratulations and continue your good work. We are so all proud of you. Okay, we have next Dr. G.S. Bhattacharya Memorial All-Rounder Award. Dr. Parikh, if I can request you to be around.
Yes.
And Dr. Hemant and Dr. Govind Babu sir also. And the recipient for the award is Dr. Guru Prasad Bhatt, our all-rounder. Would you like to introduce Dr. Guru Prasad?
Guru Prasad, as is mentioned here, besides being a superb oncologist, medical oncologist, and being recognized for all the medical responsibilities, there are so many other things that make him an all-rounder. May I request you to please come on stage, please. His home is full of birds and butterflies. He spends months in the snows at the peak of the mountains. And he is our Iron Man, doing triathlon as if we are going for a morning walk. So we are honored to have you here, and we feel that it's appropriate that you are the recipient of Dr. G.S. Bhattacharya Award.